one of the things that we wanted to do is we really wanted to let our audience in on just our lives and our journeys up until this point. And so we thought it would be a good idea for the next couple of episodes to really just share our journeys, our salvation moments, our testimonies of like all that God has done in our lives. And also just how did we get to where we are today and how we met our husbands. And so we're going to start with Kat today. And so I want to start with saying, Kat, did you grow up in church? And if not, what was the turning point for you?
Yeah, so I did not grow up in church. My family didn't go to church or anything like that. My mom actually she grew up Catholic, so she did do the sacraments. And I remember her telling me that sometimes they would go to Sunday school, but it wasn't like a regular, consistent part of their lives. It was just something that my grandma had them do. And my dad actually went to St. Anthony's in like the Long Beach area. It's a Catholic school as well. So he went through there his whole life. He was in St. Anthony's. So I'm sure that there are things that they do, knowing that it's a Catholic school, that there are things that they practice there. And then his aunt, so my great aunt, would occasionally, she couldn't have kids. So I think she really wanted to have a girl, and my grandmother, which is her sister, passed away. So she kind of took to me because my grandmother really wanted a granddaughter. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it was very rare, maybe like 2 to 3 times my whole life. Mm-hmm. She would take me on weekends, and I remember her bringing me to church. It was a Christian church. And I remember I loved going. She would get me these dresses, and I remember like playing with the kids after service, and there was no children's church then, so I'm just sitting in the back or whatever. But yeah, that was like my only experience of church ever until I was 19. And then when I turned 19, I started working at Vaughn's. And one of my coworkers, who I actually started dating, he was a PK. And that's how I met Pastor Sanders. I love him so much. That's how I met my pastor, Pastor Sanders, because I was actually dating his son. And that's how I got into church. So it wasn't until I was 19. And I loved going. My boyfriend at the time, he did not. So he was one of the typical PKs that you hear about. So he did not like going to church. I remember like going over to the house in the morning and like having to get him out of bed and be like, Mom, like we're going to be late. And so, yes.
Wait, so that was your salvation moment, or you just...
No, that's how I got introduced and how I started going regularly. But like my salvation moment was actually after we broke up. So we dated for maybe like 3 years. Yeah, we probably dated for about 3 years. At some point within that 3 years, I accepted Jesus, but I wasn't living my life as if I did. And we broke up. I remember we broke up in 2015. It was like right after the summer ended, 2015. And I remember I stopped going to church because I felt weird. Like that's his family's church, like that's, so that's just a little awkward, like me going to church, whatever. And that was my only experience of church, the only church I went to regularly. So I didn't really know where to go. I didn't have any friends who went to church. So my family didn't go to church. So I just kind of stopped going. And then I remember maybe about 3 months after we broke up, I was going to school I had been going to school to become a teacher. And my pastor knew this. And so they knew I was studying to be a teacher. And occasionally when I was at the church, I would help out with children's church. And so I remember their children's church leader, she was there for I think 20 years. She was moving to a new church and they didn't have a children's church leader. And so I remember 3 months after we broke up, his dad calls me and he asked me if I wanted to come back and lead children's church. And I was so excited, but I was also really nervous because I wasn't sure how people would, receive me since I wasn't dating, his son anymore. But it wasn't weird at all. People weren't upset. His mom, of course, I love her so much. She was sad about it. But no one kind of was towards me or anything like that. So that's how I got back, was my pastor called me to come back to help with children's church. That's how I got back in. And maybe about 2 months afterwards, I still wasn't like living the life. I was going through an identity crisis and just struggling with who I was and what I was called to do. And I remember being in my car and I was just lost. And I remember I was listening to Bryson Tiller's first album. And I was just like in my car crying. And that coming Sunday was like the youth takeover that we had. And like I said, this was a couple months into me taking over. And I just remember feeling that service, like feeling the presence of the Holy Spirit, like so strongly. And I was just like in tears. And it was just something I couldn't explain. You know, I know people talk about that, but it was literally one of those experiences that I just couldn't explain. And I just felt like known and loved. And I had that comfort and that peace. And so I remember going home that night. And I remember I had my Bible, but it wasn't until that night that I dated it. And I like dated it and that was like my true like coming to Jesus moment. And that was back in 2016. So ever since then, things just moved very quickly for me. Should we pause there or should I keep going?
Yeah, what questions?
Okay, yeah, I'm like, okay.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to know, because you said your mom and your dad, they grew up Catholic. Like they were practicing, obviously, the Sunday thing. So how was that relationship? Like you started going to a Christian church, completely different, right? Ish. So what was that like? How was your mom supportive? Like what was that relationship like after you had just had this radical encounter with Jesus?
Yeah, I would say, well, my dad has always been in and out of my life, so it wasn't really much different with my dad. And my mom, you know, she was supportive. It wasn't, she didn't like, you know, I think she was very put off by the Catholic church. So it wasn't like she was like, oh no, like you're doing the wrong thing, you know? She was supportive, but like it was just me by myself for a while. And then I can't remember how long into my journey that like after that encounter with Jesus, my brothers started coming. So my two brothers started coming, and I want to say they came at separate times. Maybe my older brother came first, and then my little brother started coming with me, and then my mom got interested, and so then my mom started coming. So so that was my experiences. Like it was kind of me first, and then like my family members started to kind of follow after me, but it just stayed there, like my brothers and my mom. It didn't go beyond that. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's beautiful. I think, okay, what you mentioned vaguely or briefly, like about like this moment that you had, like what was happening in your world when you were having this identity crisis? That like, was it something that he invited you like to church and you were just like, look, I need something, or was it pulling teeth? Like what made you just want to go to church, like not having a background?
Yeah. So when I started dating, his name is Grant. When I started dating him, and his dad, that was one of his requirements, like you guys have to go to church. His dad was that type, like if you're in this house, you go to church. So he had to go to church. And he, you know, his parents had talked to me, and his parents are amazing. I love them so much. And so I started going, and I loved it. Like I just loved, I was just encouraged, and I loved hearing the word. I was interested in it, but like I said, my lifestyle wasn't really like aligning with everything, but I just had this like comfort and joy just being there and being in the atmosphere. It was something about the environment that I loved. And like I said, my pastor Sanders, like I've never met anyone like him. He is like the definition of a shepherd. Like, and that's just who he was to me. And he was that inside of church and outside of church. I saw that in his life wherever we went. I would go to his family's house, like for holidays and stuff like that, or we would just go out to eat. And like his Pastor Sanders would he would just, talk to anyone he sees. And he wouldn't tell them he was a pastor, and he would invite them to service, and he would want to know your name and what do you do, and like just in your life. But he cared about your life. Yeah. And so I think God strategically used him because I had never seen a man like that before, who was so intentional in the lives of other people, and he actually cared about people. So yeah,
pretty rare today.
Yeah.
What was your life like? You said you mentioned several times you're like, I wasn't living, like my lifestyle didn't line up with.
Yeah. So I'd say like after Grant and I, we were like sexually active. And after we broke up, I just felt like I was always the type of girl, I think we've talked about it before, like I knew I wanted to be married. Like I dated with the intention of being married. I wanted to have that like high school sweetheart type story, and so I always dated with that intention. And once I saw it wasn't going in that direction, and I knew it wasn't going in that direction, it was just kind of like, yeah, well, let's just end this because it's not going anywhere. And so that's when Grant and I, like, I just saw we were just going different directionally in our lives. Like, I was a very motivated, self-motivated person. Like, I was going to school, doing it on my own, working 2 jobs. Like, I was just very self-motivated, and he was the opposite. And I just saw that wasn't, it was just clashing. Yeah. And I just felt like, yeah, that's not the person I want to marry. I don't want to like be your mom. You know what I mean? That's what I felt like. And so we broke up. And then after then, I felt like I was just like lost. Like I felt like I was relationally lost. Like, I wanted to be married, and I just felt like I was trying to do the things and trying to make good decisions and to get myself to that point. And I just felt like I was making, poor decisions and spouses. And I just was like broken. I remember like, I think at that point, it was like popular to like girls began to like be like, oh, well, we're just dating. You know what I mean? Like
very casually.
Yeah, very casually. And I had never done that before. And so I thought like, well, maybe I should try this out. Maybe this is not, maybe my approach is wrong. And so I started trying to date casually. And I think that like messed me up. Like it truly messed me up, was just because it just wasn't me before I even came to Christ. I just was never me. And so I tried this out and, trying to do something that other people are doing. And, and that I was just really broken by that. After I probably did that for about 2 to 3 months, maybe. And I was really broken by it. So it wasn't a long season, but it was enough for me based off of like just who I was. Like that just wasn't something I ever did. And so I tried it out. It just, I remember just being so broken, trying to date casually and trying to take on these strategies and methods that I saw other people doing. In
retrospect, do you see like God moving in your life, like leading up to that kind of moment of salvation?
I think so. I feel like it was like I said, the time period was very short in between, like, the breakup, and it was crazy because the breakup was very clean. Like it wasn't a messy, back and forth, kind of breakup. It was very clean. Like, I feel like God did that. Like it was like, yeah, no, like this is ending. And my heart, I had already moved on before it ended. You get what I mean? So when it ended, it was just like, this is it. There wasn't a back and forth conversation about it.
Yep.
And so it ended. And then, like I said, maybe like 2 months later, I get the call from his dad because I had left, and I just felt it was awkward, to be there still.
Yeah.
And about 2 months later, I get the call from his dad. We met up a few times, talked through things, and then I want to say it was like it had to. Yeah, so I didn't officially take over to the end of November.
Mm-hmm.
And in February is when I had that encounter, February of the following year. So it was a very short window of me kind of like just living recklessly, according to how I was prior.
Yep.
And, God was like, yeah, no, this is not happening. This is not who I've called you to be. This is not what I have for you. And then I just had that radical encounter. And then ever since then, things have just been like very, very quick in my spiritual development and in my growth and in my relationship with the Lord. Things have just moved very quickly. Yeah. I remember our marriage counselors had told me, God was strategic in that. Like he had to get you ready for your husband. And so that's why part of your spiritual development was just so quick. It was very rapid. There were people who still to this day don't even, they're like, I still forget that you've only been saved like, 7 years, 8 years, because the development was just super quick. Yeah.
Yeah. God, I love, like, I always say this too. I feel like God can do a quick work if we let him.
Right.
I think. Yeah, absolutely. So after you said yes, or you get the call, you're working for the church, 2 months later, you have this radical encounter. What happens next?
So then I connected really well with my young adult pastor, Michael Johnson.
At the same church or? Oh, okay.
At the same church. And I was just so interested in the word. I remember like reading my Bible every day, like locking myself in my room and reading the Bible, journaling, and just hearing from the Lord so much through journaling. And then my young adult pastor, he was very much into like spiritual gift tests. And so he saw that in me. And so he kind of pulled it out too. So he was just like, I want you to take this test and, like, find out your gifts, and we want to utilize your gifts and everything like that. And so he helped a lot. And then I started, I love to read. So I started buying faith-based books. So my library is literally filled of faith-based books. And so that's when it kind of started. So I remember reading God's at War. And that was one of the ones that I read. And so then I shared it with my young adult pastor. And so then we started doing a Bible study on it. Not a Bible study, but a book study on it. And so we were tag teaming on that. So he would take one chapter, I would take another chapter. And it was just like Zoom, just kind of going through the chapters, debriefing, pulling things out. So I started doing that literally a couple months after that encounter. And so then I started speaking. So I started speaking at my church first. So I started speaking there, and then I started getting opportunities at churches elsewhere. And my own adult pastor, Michael, he would put on like worship events, revival nights. So he would, pull me as one of the speakers. And so I just started speaking, quite frequently. And yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And so tell me what your journey has been. Obviously you, it's a unique story in the sense of like everybody is, which I feel like there's some similarities with me and you, but everybody's journey isn't always like diving right into ministry.
Oh yeah.
So I think that, it's unique in that way, but like, tell me what was like that journey with God? Like what did it look like? Cause you were a self-starter, obviously. Like you seem to be somebody who like, you're a self-learner and you don't, I don't know. You don't need, it didn't seem like you were very needy in the sense, obviously you had a great pastor who shepherded your heart and really came alongside you and really poured into you, which I think is necessary, especially in those formative years of our faith walk. But like, tell me what was that journey looking like as far as like you and the Lord, you spending time with him? Like, what was he revealing? What was he showing? What was he exposing? What was he like doing in like your heart during that time?
Yeah. I feel like it was undoing a lot of things that I just grew up doing. Because like I said, it wasn't until I think I was like 22 or 23. Oh, I just turned 23. So I had just turned 23. So it was a lot of years that I had spent without knowing him. So it was like me learning who I was through the word. And so that was just like pivotal for me. And it literally shifted my life. Like friends, lost friends, because I literally then the day that I had the encounter, I went home, dated my Bible, and previously I had saw the book The Weight by Megan Good and Devon Franklin, and I had bought it. And and I remember going home that day, and my mom was like, "Oh, you got a package." And it was super weird because mail is not delivered on Sunday, but the book came that Sunday. So I say it was
That's insane.
So like strategic in it. And I remember I started reading my Bible, and I started reading that book, and I was like glued in that book. And I made that decision to, stop having sex and to practice abstinence until I was married. And so my whole life shifted. Like my friends were kind of like, "That's weird," like, and so, so my friend groups changed. I had to find new friends that shared the same beliefs. And, that was different. And then even in school, like I said, I was going to school to be a teacher. So I remember being at Cal State Long Beach, and I was almost done with school. And once you get towards the end of your degree for teaching, you start to take classes that teach you how to teach. So once I got into those classes, I remember it was this one class, and they were telling us like, hey, like I was going to school to get my multiple subject. So I was going to teach elementary school. So you have to teach all the subjects. You don't have a choice. And so I remember them saying, starting as early as second grade, they're now going to start implementing LGBTQ history inside the books, so that kids can know about that. And I was just like, ooh, like that. And at that point, I had already had that encounter, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to teach lies to kids. And so I made the decision then, once I found that out, I was like, okay, I'm going to go the private school route, so that I can, and work at a Christian school, so I can, still teach, but not have to, teach these lies. So it was a shift radically. My whole life changed, my world changed, my friend groups changed, relationships changed. And like I said, God was just kind of undoing a lot of things that I just, learned throughout my life, of living all these years without knowing him.
I love that quote that says, "Show me your friends, I'll show you your future." It kind of sounds like similar to you. Like, what would you say that was like super pivotal for you and like your journey? Would you have been like where you are now currently, in your walk, married with kids, like truly genuinely following after the Lord, had you kept the same friends that you had?
Probably not.
No, why?
I don't think so. Because like you said, like your friends kind of shape. There's a scripture in Proverbs, I want to say, where it talks about bad company corrupts good character. So, I just had to distance myself. And I don't think it was me intentionally, because there were still some friends that I felt like
kind of held
I
on.
wanted to bring you with me, almost like, I wanted you to make this choice with me, but like it wasn't someone who convinced me to make the decision. It was me spending time in the presence of the Lord that shifted my heart, changed my desires. And so that's how that decision was made, because I wanted to know him and I wanted to please him and be close to him, right? And so that's what made me make the decision. So, obviously there were friends who I loved and adored, but it just wasn't the direction that they wanted to go. So they just naturally distanced themselves from me. And so it was just kind of just like a gradual thing that happened.
And then how did you and Keena meet?
So it was actually through Michael Johnson.
Okay. The young adult. Okay. Yep.
So so it was at his birthday party that same year that I had the encounter. It was at his birthday party, and they had known each other for years. And Keena had actually been following me on IG, but I didn't know who he was. And so, like I said, I wasn't the type to just talk to men I didn't know. And like, that just wasn't me.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't following him back.
Dang.
So he sees me, and we're like both waiting outside the gate. It was like him and two other guys. And one of them was Jax and one was Jerry. And Jax is very outgoing. And so he's just like talking to me, and I'm just like, I'm talking back, but like not trying to give you too much attention because I don't know who you are. And then I realized, oh, we're going to the same place. And so, because it was at his house. And so we went in, and we connected on like a very friendship level. And Jax was trying to talk to me that night. And after that night, I followed him back on IG. And so we were just friends. We would see each other at like church events and stuff like that. But it wasn't until the following year that we really started to like hang out, like one-on-one.
Okay.
And so when I met him, he was actually dating someone at the time, but she had passed away. Like a few months later, actually, she passed away. And so when we like started hanging out like one-on-one, I remember just checking on him, just reaching out to him to see how he was doing.
Checking on him.
It was really he'll try to
I was checking on him.
It was really like, I'm just checking on you to see if you're okay.
Right. No, I'm just kidding. Done.
And he was trying to go to Cerritos at the time. I had went to Cerritos and transferred to CSULB. And I was like, oh yeah, I can help you. I know some of the teachers. Like, I can give you some recommendations on teachers and stuff like that. So that's how we started to like talk regularly.
Okay.
And then we started hanging out. But this was it was too soon after his ex had passed away. And so it just wasn't a good season for him. I felt like he was like going through the stages of grief, and he didn't really know how to communicate that with me, even though we were very like, I was like, like, you can tell me, like, I know this is, soon after, like, I would check on him to see how he was doing emotionally and stuff like that. But I think it was just immaturity on his part. And so he just kind of stopped talking to me.
Ghosted you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but it was weird because like we would still see each other at events, right? And so he would just be kind of weird. Like when we saw each other, he wouldn't like say hi unless I said hi. So it was just kind of that situation. And so then, I remember, Jamaica, which is Michael Johnson's wife, she was really upset and him just kind of ghosting me. And I was obviously upset by it because I was like, you can, like, if you need time to heal, like, it's okay. You know what I mean? But it wasn't that maturity there just yet. And so I just stopped talking to him, and I stopped seeing him, and I started dating someone else. We weren't dating then, but I started dating someone maybe like, this was 2017 where we started hanging out. So I just started dating this guy until like the end of 2017, like September-ish. Yeah. And so it was through one of my friends. It was like one of her family members. And so we started dating for a couple months, and he was great. He's a really good guy. But I can tell that I was more spiritually developed than him. And I knew God was calling me into ministry and to teach and preach. And I just felt like, I know my personality. I know I can be a little bit dominant. And so I knew I needed someone who knew more than me, who I couldn't walk over, especially in that spiritual, piece. Like, he was definitely like what you would call like, oh, on paper, he has everything. You know what I mean? Like he was a great guy. But it just wasn't,
like, accomplished wise.
Right. Yeah. Like he had already bought his own house. He was making great money. He was a fun guy, sweet guy. Like, he was that. But spiritually, I just felt like he was not as mature as me.
Yep.
And I tried to see if the desire would come like the way I had a desire to study. And but it it just wasn't there. And so he actually ended things with me at the end of the year.
Okay.
And I was very surprised. It was like a shock.
It just kind of came out of nowhere?
It came out of nowhere. Yeah, it came out of nowhere. And, you know, I dated with the intent to marry, right?
Of course.
So
it wouldn't be cat.
Right. So it came out of nowhere. And then I remember in the new year, like, he had said it was like becoming too real for him. Even though we had these conversations prior, right? It wasn't like it was a shock or whatever. But he was just dealing with some things himself. And so then Keena and I actually started talking again. But it was just very random. Just like we saw each other at Jamaica's birthday party. That's what it was. We saw each other at her birthday party, and that was our first time seeing each other in months. And you know, we said hi, you know, and then occasionally we would see each other. And the guy that I was dating, he kept trying to like kind of go back and forth with me a little bit. And I was just like, I think I was still trying to figure out, like, do I even want to go this direction
like
with you
like
anymore?
y'all being in a relationship, like on and off type of?
Yeah, like he would still like, oh, like I still want to take you out on dates and stuff, but and it was just kind of confusing, right?
Okay.
And so I remember I started getting back into services again, like revival nights and worship nights, and because that wasn't his thing, right?
Okay.
So I started going again, and of course I started seeing Keena again, and at these events. And so Keena and I just reconnected on a friendship level. I remember one Sunday, Michael was like, are you and Keena like, and I was like, oh no, that's never happening again. And so I remember saying that because it was really just a friendship thing. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going there with you again. And I remember it was one service, and it was actually the service where I first met your husband. So it's so random.
Okay.
Yeah. I first met Jose.
I remember.
At Life of Faith.
Okay. Yep, I was there. Yeah.
You were there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me and Mama.
I remember seeing you at services too.
Yeah.
And I remember that night, he prophesied to me, and then someone else did as well. And one of the things they said was like, the person that you're seeing now is kind of like the sheep in wolf's clothing or whatever, or wolf in sheep's clothing. And I had already kind of been like battling with continuing things with him. And so then that was just like a confirmation for me. And so after I got that word, I was just like, this is it. Like,
wow.
Yeah, like we're not going to be able to go this direction anymore. And then at that point, he was like, I'm ready now, you know, like, you know, I'm ready for marriage and all this stuff. And I was just like, yeah, well, I don't think you're it for me. And so then Keena and I started hanging out more. I remember I asked, his birthday party was coming up, and he used to throw birthday parties. And then we were hanging out. He like asked me to be his stylist or whatever. So I remember we like went to the mall together with his cousins and his nephews. And we were like checking out clothes and stuff like that. And I helped him put it together, his outfit. And so we just were hanging out more, and we were hanging out in group settings and stuff like that, like with his family. I remember there was a service where I brought some of my kids from children's church, and we all like went together, and he received a word that night from Bishop PG, who passed away. He received a word that night about his wife, and we had went to the service together. And yeah, I remember he had gotten confirmation that I was his wife, but he didn't tell me.
Wow.
And so we never said anything to each other. And then after his birthday, I want to say like in May, we kind of made it known that we were feeling each other. And then it just was really quick after that. Like in May, we made it known. June, we became boyfriend and girlfriend, and only like our close friends knew. We didn't make it very public or anything like that. And by August, this was 2018. So by May, we made it known. June, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. August 2018, we got engaged. And then the following year, 2019 in May, we got married. So it was probably like a year from us, like making it verbal that we liked each other to us getting married, it was about a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then y'all had kids.
And then
y'all have kids.
And then on our wedding month, the month we got married, we got pregnant with Cohen.
Yep.
So that was very fast, which we weren't trying to get pregnant. We got pregnant. And then Colin came early.
Yep.
6 months into our marriage, Colin came in November. I was on a hospital bed from October to Colin being born. And then we, the following year, 2020, was pandemic. Colin was home. And I think I remember like texting you too. Like I had wanted you guys to come see him, but then we found out about the COVID and we put that on pause. And then we moved to Texas in October of 2020, did ministry. We moved for ministry and did ministry for about a year and a half out there. It was a hard season out there for sure. That was really, really rough. And then we came back in actually, we got pregnant with Christian a couple months into us moving. And then we had Christian is our Texas baby. So she was born in Texas. And then we came back in 2022. She was born in 2021. We came back in 2022. And so, yeah, that's where we are now.
Appreciate you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. In 60 seconds. And I just want you to, thanks for sharing, like, where you, like, how God, like, radically saved you and you had an encounter. But, like, can you tell us in, like, 60 seconds, like, what's God doing in Cat now?
Ooh, 60 seconds. I feel like God is really, it's funny because I feel like God is really having me in this season of, like, using my voice, because I feel like there was a season where I wasn't, and so using my voice, and then also just like I have this burden for families and parenting and just us living out the life that God intended us to live as sons, as daughters, as parents, as wives, as husbands. So I just feel like that's what the Lord is doing in me right now in this season. Just like getting me back to like his original intent, and doing it well, doing things well. That's another thing is like I keep going back to when everything is done, I want to be, in my parenting, in my marriage, in my assignments, right? And my gifts. Like I want to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant.
Amen.
That's, I feel like I'm in that season right now. It's just learning how to do things well, how to do life well in the way that he intended it to be.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I love just them getting to hear more about who you are, what God's done in your heart. And so we appreciate y'all for tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Until next time.